Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm joined by Jessica Wright, who is a Navy spouse and a life and career development coach for leaders. We've been having a great time in the green room just chatting. And I feel like I should have recorded earlier, Jessica, because, I mentioned you're very articulate. And I love the way that you were telling the story about your journey to getting to your coaching business and also your side hustle. Maybe we'll pull out some of that later on, but let's stay on point for now because you're fascinating. And I love that you have a vegan cupcake side hustle and your love of entrepreneurship because it's not for everyone, right? So can you tell us a little more about what it is about business ownership that drew you in?
Yeah, thank you so much. I've loved learning about you too in the green room. Um, I've had the opportunity to work for some really great leaders, and then maybe one or two that we'll just say weren't so great. But I always knew in my heart that I wanted to work for someone, or sorry, for myself someday. And so, when I was working with those great leaders, I paid attention. I noticed how they made me felt and how they made decisions and how they ran their teams, um, sort of how the community responded to them and what they were doing, in that arena. And then when I wasn't happy working for someone, I paid attention to that too, and all of those same things, but kind of in a different light. And eventually military spouse life just made entrepreneurship a no-brainer and like the obvious next step.
And so I am gonna, I threatened you that I was gonna bring back some of our little conversation. And you were talking about in prior to being an entrepreneur, you were a pastor. And
Yeah.
then it dawned on you that what you really enjoyed about pastoring was the connection with people. And that's what led you to coaching. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, I got my master's degree in transformational leadership. At the time I wanted to be a leader in the food justice world. And that wasn't quite happening. And so I got this pastor role, which I did for 6 years. And when I started to feel like it was time to move on from that, the obvious questions of like, but what next, came up. And so I thought about what I really liked about that position and what I didn't like as much. And that connection piece and accompanying people through challenges was what came up. And I started thinking about the coach that I had had during graduate school. My program forced us to have a coach, which was so great. She was the best. And I thought about how much I loved that experience and what I got out of it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think I want to be a coach. Like, I think that's what this next step looks like for me. It has all of those things I like and, very little of what I don't like, and then I can start working for myself too. We had a potential overseas move, maybe in the works a year out. That didn't end up happening, but and I was like, oh, if I start this now, I can be like good to go, have something ready to take with me when we move. And so obviously, like I said, that didn't happen. But once I was finished with my coaching certification program and having the experience of getting some coaching sessions under my belt, I told you earlier, when I finish a coaching session, like I'm an introvert, but that I'm flying after a session when someone trusts me to tell me their story. We kind of pick it apart together, and then they have a very clear picture at the end of like what the next step is. That feels so good.
I love your circuitous route to your passion. I think that's really cool because I think that a lot of people don't necessarily listen to themselves really, like, or they don't listen to their feelings when they're experiencing something to recognize, oh, this feels good, I want to do that, like that's what I want to do, because they're so rigid in that this is what I thought I was going to do with my career. I thought I was going to be a pastor, so I'm going to be a pastor. Instead you're like, wait a minute, do I want to be a pastor, or do I just really want to minister to people, and maybe coaching is the way I really want to do it. So props to you. But that brings up another question I have, because I'm gonna, you're a coach, so you're the perfect person to ask. As an entrepreneur yourself and a coach, we mentioned entrepreneurship is not for everybody. It's not easy. Business ownership is, I think everybody glamorizes it a little bit or romanticizes it. And I'm like, it is not fun. Um, so who is it a good fit for? Like who would make a good entrepreneur?
Yeah, and I'll start off by saying first, I have wondered in the last few years if it was for me.
Haven't we
Um,
all, right?
yeah. And every time I get through that, I'm like, yes, this is still right. But that I love this question because I think there's so much unfortunate messaging out there that tries to make it sound like you'll be successful if you just do this, and you'll make $1 million and work from the beach if you just do this or that. And I've certainly fallen prey to that before, that if I just found the right strategy, I would be more successful than I was already. Um, but entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. And, you know, I also want to add this. If you are listening to this and you have a job working for someone else that you like, um, and it fits you and your family's needs right now, don't feel pressured by this messaging that you like. It's the best way to work and the best way to be. Like, because like we've been saying, it's not for everyone. So I just want to get that out of the way because I just hate that predatory messaging so much. Just do the work that's important to you, get the money and the schedule that you and your family need, and um, it's okay, truly. But if entrepreneurship does sound interesting to you, I'd say know your why. And I know that's a little cliche, but why is this important to you? Why does the mission tugging at your heart feel necessary for the world? Why are you the one to make this happen? Why not someone else? Because things are going to get rough sometimes. Like I said, like in the last 3 or 4 years, I have almost jumped ship a few times. But I know my why. And entrepreneurship is a constant state of, you know, learning, trying, moving forward, getting knocked down, crying, accepting, laughing, changing. It's all wash, rinse, repeat. A lot of those emotions, a lot of those feelings. And if you don't know, feel, and understand that why very deep down, it's going to be nearly impossible to keep going. Um, and I'm in the third iteration of my business, my coaching business. And every time I transition, I feel better about what I'm offering and who I'm connecting with. But the road to getting there every time is surprising and bumpy. So I really want people to understand that why. Um, and finally, I think a good candidate for entrepreneurship is someone who isn't afraid to build meaningful relationships and kind of play the long game, when it comes to building your business. Um, and know how to invest in people, not because you can get something from them, but because it's worth having those connections for the good of your industry, your community, your mental health. It's going to take time, but putting yourself out there and making professional friends in whatever way fits your unique personality, um, it's going to be such an important foundation for not only your business's success, but also just for your like sustainable sense of joy in what you do.
That's such a perfect segue to my next question because when I was reading your highlight, it occurred to me that you still believe in joining organizations and the importance of volunteering. And, people are kind of moving away from that. I think it's gotten a little bit of a bad rap because people are like, no, we're not going to do free work. But I'm like, well, we still believe in strategic volunteering. And I'm a joiner as well. Like, I think I need to join organizations and clubs just to meet like-minded people because in the age of social media and more online communities, it's not easy to meet people, especially if you don't have school age children. I think that people who have school age children are in a better position because you meet them through school or sports or whatever. But for the rest of us, we're kind of on our own, right? Unless, like I wish my mom would set up play dates for me. But absent of that, can you tell us a little bit about, the importance of volunteering in clubs? in your life in terms of forging connections, especially in our little transient lifestyle. I mean, talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, and your mom might set play dates up for you with people you don't actually want to play with.
Exactly.
Uh, yeah, and admittedly, I'm in a new phase of this and still working it out a bit, but I've noticed a tendency for military spouses to stick close to their local military community, especially if you live on base or something like that. And it makes total sense. I'm not knocking that. I've made some of my very best friends for life with spouses within my husband's squadron. So I would never tell you to not build and maintain those relationships. But I think if it stops there, we can unknowingly continue to build up that isolated feeling of military life, like if we only know other military people. Um, and the military automatically builds that into our life. Maybe not intentionally, but that's just kind of the way it happens. So like, don't add to it, I guess is what I'm saying. So, and I understand it's nice to have those friends who get it, but I can also confidently say that it feels really good to be connected with people who help us develop and celebrate the other pieces of what makes us unique aside from military life. So, even though it might be for a short time, which I know is another challenge in connecting in your local community, establishing yourself there, or establishing yourself both in and outside of the military base is a great way to establish place and home for yourself, which I think is so important for feeling grounded, not only as entrepreneurs, but everyone. So things I've done include serving on boards, attending and volunteering at town events. I work at a co-working space where I can meet other entrepreneurs doing cool things in their community, and we hang out. They've connected me to really fun things happening. Um, so yeah, I know I know that making these connections makes it even harder to say goodbye when you have to move inevitably someday. But I truly think it's a bittersweet reality um, that falls a little bit more on the sweet side. Like,
Oh, yeah, you're right.
yeah, this is so cheesy, but like, how lucky are we as military spouses to have this opportunity to build such a huge network with rich experiences, memories, and long lasting connections to a really diverse group of people and places? And I know it doesn't always feel like that, but the more and more time I spend with this military spouse title, the more I can see that during the rough times and know that it's true. So yeah, get out there, put yourself out there.
No, and you never know how long you're going to be someplace because, you know, we're actually I'm from Northern Virginia and we actually ended up here. And I didn't know that we'd have so many assignments here. Because our son just refused to move after a while. He's like, I really like it here. I'm like, very good, because this is where we're retiring. But like now that we're on the other side, it made the transition so much easier because there's a period of time when you transition to where you don't necessarily want to hang out with the military folks because you don't feel like you're really part of the active duty family anymore. So you have a little, oh, we have to feel our way through our community because now we have to get to know everything else. And so it's nice to have other networks. You're absolutely right. And even if you're not in transition, I don't think it hurts to know people outside of the military in your community. I think that is a great tip. So we mentioned a little bit about your vegan cupcake side hustle. Love that so much. What do you talk? How do you what would you say to spouses who are thinking about generating a side hustle? Maybe they have a job that they love. Maybe they like working for somebody else because they don't want to worry about, like benefits and pay, and they just want to work 9 to 5 and come home. But they do want to do a little something else, whether it's writing a book or baking. How did you get started with your side hustle?
Yeah. Well, I would say that my side hustle started first, like many years before the coaching, because I love to bake. I've baked for a lot of weddings and birthday parties, and I have an order of 4 dozen gluten-free cupcakes heading down to Seattle this weekend for a 4-year-old's dinosaur themed birthday party. So like I've been doing that, and I started coaching a few years later, and I realized pretty quickly, I was like, "Man, I could probably make more money if I really went all in on this cupcake thing." However, it's hard on me physically. And so I'm intentionally keeping it a side thing, just because I don't want to lose the fun and the creativity that goes into it. And so keeping it small is a very intentional thing for me. And that's something that you can choose as well. If you have a full time job already that you like, or maybe you're an entrepreneur with getting a business going, but there's this other little thing that you'd kind of like to work on the side. You can choose how much time and energy and effort you put into that side hustle. So don't feel like you have to be going all in on two or three different things at the same time. Like we have the power to choose our schedule and what we're giving energy and attention to. Um, but start with like what you love doing. Um, maybe it's some sort of crafting or writing, or there's plenty of people looking for freelance and sort of gig economy kind of roles right now. They're just wanting to contract out a project or two. Um, that's kind of the economy we're living in, which certainly has its frustrations, but that's maybe a good thing for those folks who are just wanting something a little on the side. There are a lot of opportunities there. Get in the room with the people who are doing what you want to do, and that takes facing that imposter syndrome that you might have of like, well, I want to write a book, but I'm not an author yet. So why would I go to an event for authors? Because they're going to be nice to you and like want to support you and help you and connect you. And it's okay that you haven't written anything yet. They at one point in their life hadn't written anything yet too. They didn't come out of the womb a best-selling author.
Right.
And so get in the room and actively face those messages that I know are going to happen in the head of like, I'm not here yet, I'm not ready, I'm not good enough yet. Well, it doesn't matter, just get there. And
Right.
you'll start to build that community pretty quickly too, like we talked about earlier. So
No, I love that. I think those are good closing thoughts, actually. I was going to ask you a last question, but I think that is actually a nice parting thought. And if you have other questions for Jessica, like just leave them in the comments and we'll make sure that she gets them. We stay in touch with everyone and she'll be with us for a whole week on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. So like she will see the comments. But thank you so much for spending today with us. And thank you all for joining us. And I hope you'll come back next week to see our next military spouse highlight. And if you have a great story to tell, please fill out your own, highlight because we would love to share your story and inspire other military spouses. Thank you so much to our friends at USAA for making these conversations possible. And we will see you guys next week. Bye.